on the bottom of page 140, you have this. They have this equation. The square root of 5 times x is equal to 10. What are possibilities for x? Right? To solve an equation, we want to get x by itself. So when x is inside of a square root, we first want to get the square root by itself. So in this case, the square root is already by itself. And then what's the opposite of square rooting? Squaring. And if you square both sides, then you just get 5x is equal to 100. And now you divide both sides by 5, and x would be 20. So the idea with solving equations that are called rational equations, and we can highlight, radical equations, right? A radical equation is when there's a variable inside of a radical. What we're going to do is we are going to isolate the square root and then square both sides. Example 1. I have 3 equals, in A, 3 equals 4 root x. When the square root, like this is one term on this side that includes the square root, at this point you could square both sides. We would say that the term with the square root is isolated. It's by itself. So if I square this whole side and I square this whole side, here I'm going to get 9. And what happens when you multiply 4 root x by 4 root x? You will get 16x. Or you'd get square root of x squared, right? But what does square root of x squared do? It cancels out and just becomes, now technically it would become the absolute value of x, but this question is only defined when x is positive, so you wouldn't need the absolute value bars. 16x. How do I get x by itself? Divide both sides by 16. So I squared both sides right away because my term with the square root was isolated. Somebody else says, Mr. JR, what happens if I divided by 4 first? Is that okay? Yes. If you divided by 4 first, can you see that you would get 3 divided by 4 equals the square root of x? And now, if I squared both sides, well, squaring a fraction would be 3 over 4 times 3 over 4. That would give me 9 over 16, and the square root of x squared will just be x. That will work as well. For part B, some of the same skills that you had in solving equations previously, well, we want to get the square root by itself. I have some like terms here. Do you see on the one side I have 13? On the other side I have minus 7. I could put those together by adding 7 to both sides. That would give me 20. Now I could square both sides here, or I could decide to divide both sides by 2. Since things work out nicely if I divide by 2, I think I'll do that. Divide both sides by 2. I get 10 is equal to the square root of x plus 1. Now my square root is all by itself. I can square both sides. On this side, I'm going to get 100. On this side, I'm just going to get x plus 1. move the 1 over. X is equal to 99. Some of you might be feeling, okay, this is actually better than the rationalizing and the simplifying and adding stuff that we were doing earlier. Okay? The idea is you get your square root by itself. If you square both sides, that gets rid of the square root, then we can solve for x. There's some complexities that are going to come up that we're going to see, but for right now, this is where it's at. So questions are 4, 5, and 6.